Here's the thing. The thing with inflation is it's not even a choice of overspending anymore, because it's like, well, I need gas to get to work. I need food to live. I need a place to live, so I have to rent a place or buy a place.
Horseshit, dude, man. Like,
but you can't.
Totally, as sad as it sounds, until people start being unemployed, inflation is not going to slow down. So yeah, you tighten the economy, then they spend less.
They're not going to give out money this time either, because it's just going to keep forcing the inflation.
Dude,
people are going to be rallying for a basic income, but we did a basic income. It's called CERB, and now look where we're at.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
All right, welcome to the Master Keys podcast. I'm Chandler Haliburton.
I'm Neal and Andreino.
And we are the #1 real estate investing podcast in the land of Canada.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in. What we do on this show is we just talk about what we're doing in our own investments. We've got a couple hundred units to our names. And we also sell real estate as well.
Sometimes.
Neil just vacations.
I just vacation. What do we have?
Yeah.
Season 2 episode.
Oh my goodness. No sweet clue.
The year
Episode
is 2024.
38. I was going to say.
The year is 2024. Interest rates are 19.99%. People are buying houses on their credit cards because it's cheaper than getting a mortgage.
Man, don't throw that out into the universe. We don't want that. But we've got lots of crazy stuff today. We're actually going to talk about our 3. Well, you break it down. What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so our main topic is we're going to talk about the top 3 missed properties, missed deals, opportunities that we had that we look back and be like, man, I wish I had bought that because I wouldn't be on this podcast right now. And then the top 3 hits. And the reason that we're on this podcast right now is that there are some properties that made the difference, and they were able to take us from one level to the next and maybe grow or allowed you to change your life. So
so we're going to break those down a little bit to try to give some insight, and maybe people can learn from what we did wrong and the mentality that went into those mistakes, but also the thought process that went into the successes. If you find anything interesting, as always, please like, subscribe. It makes a world of difference. You guys have probably noticed YouTube just loves to mess with us. Some weeks we're up, some weeks we're down. I don't know what's going on. So if you can, just throw us a like to keep the train moving along the tracks. We're doing it big.
Yeah, well, and last time we asked for a bunch of likes and you guys gave them to us. I think we were going for 200 that time, which we got in like a day. So we also
bribed you with some money. Speaking of which, our winner for the $100 and a free month to our Patreon. You can check out our Patreon if you want to break down behind the scenes. Like I just did one that budgeted, all my renovation costs for doing 1,000 square foot unit at about $35,000. I broke it down every single line item. That's up on the Patreon. But the winner of the $100 and the Patreon subscription
is,
drum roll here, Jake Titus. And I think I actually know Jake. Pure coincidence. But congratulations, buddy. I'll find a way to hook you up. So let's dive right into it here, unless you got anything else, Neil, off the top.
No, you're going to hit me with the news, and I'm going to give you some feedback.
Well, I mean, you were joking about these rates, but let's talk about
let's hit that
the science behind it. So the U.S. inflation numbers just came out, and they're down a little bit. That's good news. You guys might remember we've been covering this stuff and tracking it on episodes. It was 9.1 in June, and then it was 8.5 in July. Inflation 8.3 in August. So things are trending in the right direction. 8.3 is still not a good number.
Super high.
But it is trending in the right direction, sort of. And here's why I say sort of. Over the last month, as you probably noticed at the pump, energy costs, gas, down 5%. So that number looks really good. That inflation being down looks really good, but that's heavily based on gas prices.
Yeah, and right now oil is down, I think temporarily going into the winter season. I think you'll see it climb again. And so we're seeing that. Plus, I think in Canada, I feel like they're probably pulling back on some taxes and forcing the price down more than it actually naturally going down to help lower the inflation numbers, to kind of show that they're doing a good job, more so than them maybe actually doing.
The concern with that, obviously, is that that's misleading, and we're getting this artificially reduced inflation number. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that they do in the States, and they do it in Canada to some degree as well, but they have something called their core inflation, which is when they move food and move energy out of their consumer price index, their bundle of goods, which I know sounds silly, but those are also the most volatile things.
Yeah.
Right? So you take out your most volatile things, their core items still went up by 0.4%.
Yeah.
Now, the main one of those other core elements is housing expenses, so rent and things like that, which is really interesting because obviously rent is going up so much, and that's driving at least 0.4% of the inflation. And you could argue that if housing hadn't ticked up on the rental side in this past month, that inflation number could have actually been a little bit lower. And I think we're going to see that because I found some other crazy stats down in the States because their number of listings are dropping. They broke it down by area. this trend of listings turning into rentals. So in Southern California, 10% of listings are getting turned into rentals.
Yeah, I saw some stats that listings were just cutting off. Like, people don't want to sell their homes. It's what we've talked about a bunch of times. Either people have rates that are locked in that aren't so bad, or they're people that were looking to sell out to move into a rental or downsize, but they're not willing to take a giant haircut on their home, and they don't need to sell. They were just hoping to capitalize on the market that are going to yank their houses off. Or you have people that made their move during a good time and are able to float both, especially if one of them's rented. So
yeah, and that's going to continue to secure the market to some degree. Obviously, there are parts of the country that are getting crushed value-wise, but certainly here in our market, we're still pretty resilient. I think last week is something 32% of homes still sold over asking. Yep. We're here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Comment below where you're from and what's going on in your area. We'd love to hear about it, but we're getting these mixed numbers from across the states. But yeah, in Southern California, 10% were converted of listings were converted to rentals. In Texas, it was 9%. Across the country,
how are they getting that stat?
Well, I find in the States, their rental data is a lot higher. And they have like MLS type systems for rental properties because rental agencies are so more prevalent than they are here.
Okay, yeah, there's probably more rental agencies. Because I say, like, on the banking side, I feel like there'd be less control because of the amount of banks that there are and different institutions. But on the flip side, I guess if they have rental agencies handling it, like your Remaxes and stuff, they track all their stuff extremely well. Yeah. So you'd be able to submit data.
I imagine also like some of these platforms like Redfin, Zillow, etc. When you withdraw your property from that, you can say why you withdraw it. Yeah. And one of them is, sold my property or, changed my property to rental. Across the U.S., 4% of listings are being turned into rentals. So that is actually going to put downward pressure on the rental market, which I know is going to relieve some people because it is expensive to rent out there right now.
It's weird though, because it's like that same listing, which probably was need to be purchased by somebody, now needs to be rented. So it will definitely help to put downward pressure. It's just we're still flat out need more inventory. Just like I was thinking about this on a side note, like the reason for the more inventory here locally, like we attribute a lot of it to immigration. But I was like, I don't know, is the States facing that same giant inflation flux, or is it more a population boom, like generational booms, where like now, like is it what generation is this? The one
I don't know.
Whatever generation
after
is
Z.
Yeah,
Z.
The generation that I'll say I'm in, I think I'm on the bottom of, and then it goes up from me.
Okay.
They're all starting to either move out of their parents' home, move out of an apartment, have kids. Like I look at majority of my Facebook, Instagram feed, it's people getting engaged and people having their first kid and this and that. And I'm like, I feel like that's part of the boom in the States that's causing this demand for housing. More so than just immigration, because I feel like a lot of those people were still living at home, or a lot of them were living in apartments and stuff like that.
I think you'd have to look at your population cohorts, because obviously there was the baby boomers, and then you can see the kids of the baby boomers, but the kids of the baby boomers have already done their thing. So I don't know. I think your age, I'll say your age as opposed to mine, like people who are 26 to 32, I don't think they're necessarily more of them than in past years based on the age of their parents and reproduction rates. But there is a lot of population change through immigration. And more local here, Nova Scotia, first 6 months of the year, I know this is something you think about a lot and talk a lot. We had 6,745 new permanent residents arrived in Nova Scotia from January to the end of June.
Wow.
To put in perspective, our previous high ever was in 2021, last year, and it was 9,020. So we are on pace to destroy the best year ever for new permanent residents.
The full year was 9,020, and we're already at 6,700 this year.
For the first 6 months, not year to date. That doesn't count July and August.
Could be like 30% higher.
Yeah. So
wow.
You've talked about that and what that means for housing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious what that means for housing, right? Everyone knows that there's more people than they need homes. The two interesting things with it are how many of them are going to stay, because obviously we had the PR program, which I think changed at the start of this year. So I think that might have skewed that number. We'll have to see what the second half of the year brings.
That's true.
And then additionally, like the stat that I just saw, and I was trying to pull it up on my phone there, was unemployment is back on the rise.
Oh, I know. In the States as well. Just it's starting to take up the unemployment rate.
Everyone I've talked to that's not necessarily as obsessively pro-immigration as I am is like, well, even if that doesn't hold off or if that doesn't make it, at least we have crazy good employment numbers. Like there's just so many jobs. That's what's keeping things moving along. That's why we haven't felt the pain yet. And then for the first time now, I saw stats get released that it just tipped over and now it actually went down, or unemployment went up by like 0.4% as well or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really concerning fact when you think about everything that's going on.
Is it a concerning fact, or is it kind of what we're hoping to happen? Like, if you raise rates this way,
Chandler's pro 19% interest rates, and
I'm just saying, but like the interest rates will only have an impact. Inflation will only slow if people, sadly, like there is a reverse correlation between, you know,
If everybody just starts being frugal, then we won't have any issues. We can have lots of people. Everyone's
not
frugal.
spend
I could
less?
probably take a lesson in frugality.
I know. How many? If we could just bring Neal's vacation budget down a shade, we would fix the Canadian
And gas
inflation.
consumption?
Yeah, exactly, man. Your jet lines alone are just driving energy costs to the roof.
Yeah, anyways, honestly, I understand, like, it is what they're going for. That I don't disagree with. It's more just like, I don't know that a lot of people said to me, I found for the last year, have been like, no, like, I think we're going to get through this. Like, economists have gotten smarter every year over year, every time this has happened. And so the boom and bust should be smaller. And I don't disagree, but it's just seeming like we're still going to have a fairly large bust. Because some people I've talked to, like, bust already happened, rates going down next year. Now I feel like the sentiment is rates are probably going to stick like this for 2 years. And yeah, we're expecting a bit more rate hikes. And yeah, unemployment's going to go down, or up, sorry, and we're going to have a bust. And I'm like, okay, a few months ago, everyone was saying that economists has sorted this all out. And now we're starting to get into this. And I'm like, then going back to my original, like, go back 3 months in these episodes. And I've always been freaking out. This whole time I've been freaking out. And I'm still on this thing. And I think, like, if you look at the banks, like, I just took some refis. I got 60, 65, 65%. Refinancing at 60, 65, and 65%.
Say this again?
So I had 3 buildings that I refinanced.
Yeah, and you were so excited. 'Cause back in the day, what would you have pulled out of those properties, let's say, a year ago? Give me just percentage-wise and interest rates on your pullout a year ago.
Oh, for sure, 75%. One of them I did a year ago, I did 88% because I did a CMHC loan. But we'll say 75. We're not talking CMHC. And I probably would have signed at like 3.8.
Okay, and tell me what it is as of last week when you did all this.
60%. At 6%, and then I just did my 265s at 6.4%.
Wow! So we're talking 10%. And what's the approximate appraised value on these?
So each of them is appraised at $1.5 million.
$1.5 So you're talking $150,000 per building
for the 2 other ones, and then the one that's 15%, I'm talking $225,000. So I left $525K on the table.
And how much?
My payments are higher.
By how much do you think?
Probably, like, with the whole payment
40%?
in. Yeah, probably about 25 to 30% more because the amount's quite a bit less.
That's true.
The amount's quite a bit less, so it's probably about 25%.
So you're getting less
more.
money.
Yeah.
By about $500,000, you said.
Yeah, and my rents are way higher than the previous pull-outs would have been.
Yeah. So you got less, $500,000 less in your pocket, and you're paying 25 to 30% more on your mortgage every month.
And really, if the rates were still down, I would have done.
stings.
I really would have done CMHC. So I actually pulled out $1 million less. I'm getting $1 million less back today.
So if your rents were so high, what was the thing they were
zero.
really pushing back on?
So 2 things. I just had actually a meeting with them right before this at lunch. And first of all, it was rates. So the DSR ratio. They just, again, the payment went up so damn much.
Yeah.
Even though my rents went up 20%, the payment, as we all know, we've talked about this 100 times, the payment went up by like 60%. Right? Because interest rates don't go up by like, went up by 2%. So your payment went up by 2%. No, if it went up by 2% and you were at 4, your payment probably went up by like 40%.
Man, that'd be a good thing, actually, if you can
I'll bring all the numbers in.
Yeah, man.
The other thing that they cited was just general risk tolerance. They said the risk tolerance is down because they tried to get an exception made to bump the numbers up a little bit. Risk tolerance was down. And they want to see stability for a year or 2 to get through this storm. They said because they expect more rate hikes.
So this is how these rates work. The rates go up. Neal gets less money.
Bleep that out.
He has to pay more, and now he can go on less fancy trips and buy less toys. That's how the rates,
no more vacations now.
That's
for 2
how
years.
the rates contract consumer demand, which hopefully will slow down inflation. And if you like that, if you like how upset Neal is, give us a like.
If you like that Neal's not getting a new car,
Just give it a little like. Give it a little. Give it boop boop boop.
So
Look
now
at this. Look at
Neal's
this. Look at
slumping
the
in his
body.
chair.
Look at the body posture here. I love it.
In 2 years, Neal's
know.
hoping to be very happy
It's
man.
gonna be me too.
But where this has become more concerning, and I'm just talking again to people in the bank, is they say there have a lot of people coming to them now that have large construction loans that they can't get them out of. I spoke to a broker yesterday who said he had 6 applications on his table, all construction loans, that he is unable to get them out of. That's one broker. He
Mutual
already
friend of
has
ours in
6.
the office. Same deal. He just finished a project. I'm midway through a project, and I'm going to get a little top up because I don't want to get rid of my initial mortgage. Right? Normally, I'd refi the whole thing. Blah blah. Like, no. I just want to top up, and then with the idea that at the end I'll pull some out. I don't know if I'm going to pull anything out at the end, and I don't know if I'll want to. because I will have this kind of little blended product between a rate that's probably mid threes, whatever my top up now. Maybe it is at 6%, but it's only for something like 15% of the overall debt. So I'll have this decent little blended project, and I'll probably just maybe even try to add a third top up to it and go like that as opposed to replacing the whole thing. That's the one thing with getting in with good conventional money to begin with, is you don't have to take the whole thing out. You can kind of top up a little bit, and the top ups are a little bit.
I will never buy another property again in my life.
Oh, remember?
It's like the meme. I will never financially recover from this.
That guy. What's his name? See, this is the thing, man. This is a great point. Tiger King.
Tiger King. There.
So what's my point about the Tiger King?
I don't know.
I'm going to bring it back to the Tiger King here. My biggest concern with this
Training lions.
is don't look them in the eye. Anyway, I'm just remembering that whole show and how good it is. So my concern with this always was less about how the market forces shift and would they overturn the knob and would this happen and would that happen. My biggest concern was the consumer psyche and how people are right now. And the reason I referenced Tiger King is because my main concern is that people have a short memory.
Yep.
And people don't really seem to care about this stuff as much as you or I or our listeners here care about it. They just go about their business and spend themselves into poverty and then complain about it until a government gets elected that promises that if they just tax people more, those people that overspent will be, have more money somehow, and then they will just continue to spend it anyway. Because there is something called the marginal propensity to consume, which means if you give me $1, I will spend 90 cents. If you give me $10, I will spend $9. Like, people just spend what they have, and it's getting to the point where
I spend $1.50.
Yeah, you got your overspenders, but people. Remember the first when it went up 1% and people were like, oh my gosh, this is unfathomable.
The market froze.
Well, all that's happened since then is that it's just continued to go up.
And now people have forgotten
right?
that.
And people have forgotten that. And now, it's the Fed is going to have their increase a week after this airs in the States, and it's going to be the same 75 basis points, which brings them in line with us, right? But people are just not changing what they're doing nearly enough. And the reason is they kind of don't care, they kind of don't know, and they kind of can't help themselves. And we forget about everything that happened. So, like, who remembers the Tiger King? It was 2 years ago, and it was the biggest thing in the world at the time, and then everyone forgot about it.
Chandler called me to buy a new car there a few weeks ago.
Like, I mean, I nearly bought a good car, but whatever. I've got the end of my lease. Listen, I have options. But my concern is that they could ratchet this thing up and people will still be dumb and just go out there, continue to spend frivolously, and then they won't be able to slow down the damn economy.
I think we're past that point. I think most people have already overspent without knowing it already. But here's the thing. The thing with inflation is it's not even a choice of overspending anymore, because it's like, well, I need gas to get to work. I need food to live. I need a place to live, so I have to rent a place or buy a place and have a mortgage.
Horseshit, dude, man. Like,
but you can't.
Totally. But people are
I'm all about frugality. I'm 100% for like being frugal, and I did that my whole, like, you want number one way to get your first down payment? Be frugal as hell. That's what I did. Yeah. But like, it's I think like even it's gotten past the point of like now trying to like bring it back. Like, it's like people do a lot of stuff and like, okay, I'll catch up on the next pay. I don't know that they'll be able to do that anymore, especially when it's like, shit, like, okay, these groceries cost me an extra $100 a month. Man.
Like,
totally, agreed, 100%.
We have to
100%.
have, as sad as it sounds, until people start being unemployed, inflation is not going to slow down. So, yeah, this is how things work. You tighten the economy, unemployment spikes, people have less money, then they spend less.
They're not going to give out money this time either, because it's just going to keep forcing the inflation.
Dude,
people are going to be rallying for a basic income, but we did a basic income. It was called CERB, and now look where we're at.
And also, I don't know if you saw here, provincially, I think they had a surplus of like $350 million. Everyone was like, give it to people, fight inflation. Yeah. And they already had it earmarked towards, paying off debt. So that's where it went. And people were like losing their mind, like, oh, why can't you just give us the money? It's like, just give people $350 million. Like, we have this problem, and we have to tackle it from the supply side. We have to try to bring some of these prices down on the supply side, but people also need to, it sucks to say, but people need to feel the pinch. There's no other way to do it, and we're so brainwashed, man. No one goes out there and seems to change anything. Like, everyone still just buys. They do not change their habits, and that, I think, is going to be the hardest thing to overcome.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what interest rate are, people are still going to be buying
like
dumb
people-
shit.
Yeah, I don't know what the general like. I'd be curious to know if people like. Do you feel stressed when your bank account gets low? Once I break between
100%.
below a certain threshold, I'm in like full psycho mode. Like I cannot. I'm
Ooh.
so stressed about everything.
Oh
Like
man.
I can't spend on
So we
anything.
don't,
Like even buying food and shit. Like I just don't want to do it. Going out, any of that kind of crap.
yeah, we don't like check in on each other's news as much anymore because we just had so much going on to cover. But like when I bought that 12-unit building,
Yeah.
I was like, man, and I had to put down. I can't even remember.
38%?
I think it was either 38 or 32%.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I got either 62 or 68%
Yeah.
financing. It took like every dollar I had to my name because I'm floating these other two projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there was a week where I was like, we got to ease up on the skip the dishes this week. Like, we got to chill for a bit here because, like, I'm tight, man. I'm tight.
Yeah. No, I
But-
totally get that.
And I'm not wishing that upon people, but we are sometimes our own worst enemy because the human desire to consume now. And we talked a lot about this on the conspiracy episode about like how, that was kind of thrust upon us.
And I mean, I just want to say this just to pump my own tires. Neal likes to pump his tires on this thing. But I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I was working on a couple deals. And for whatever reason, it's almost like fate. Some of them didn't work out. Some of them accepted offers. Actually, 2 of them accepted offers kind of without my knowledge, which I'm not super down about.
Wait, you got accepted offers?
No. I made an offer on one of them verbally, and
Oh.
then they accepted an offer on the side and basically leveraged me to get the other offer. Another one, I told them I was
This is you
working on
pumping your
my
tires?
on my no. But then I also was gonna say on a couple other deals I backed off because I was like, usually previous me would have been like, done. My refinance is coming in. I know how much it's gonna be. But I'm gonna go ahead and slap it down on the next place. And I've been playing that ballsy game for a while, and I didn't do it this time. And I'm just pumping my tires for myself. And I'm glad I didn't because when I met with them today and I found out I'm getting basically $1 million less, I'm going to be a little more frugal. I mean, I'll have cash, but I'm not going to, like, that extra money would have been the money that I was like, okay, screw it. I'll put on some alternative investments. Like, it was like a multi-unit Airbnb property downtown. It was a strip mall. There was a couple different cool properties like that. And now I'm just like, no, you know what? Like, I'm going to stay in my lane, cool off, kind of assess where things are going. And if the people are showing up with these situations that they can't get out of, maybe it's an opportunity to buy in, right?
Yeah. What do you think about this? We're talking about inflation and how people need more money. A study just found that the living wage in Halifax now would be $23.50. Currently, our minimum wage is $13.35. It's going to $13.60.
Yeah, that is kind of nuts. I don't know what the big holdup is with shotgunning it to $15 to $16 an hour. I know they're saying it's going to put. Well, I know. Okay, sorry, I do know what the holdup is because they're going to put more pressure on the business owners that have to employ these people that are already facing a lot of expenses and having trouble running their businesses.
Not just that. Like we just talked about, inflation and how giving people more money. I know everyone wishes everyone
but
had
if you're
more
giving
money,
them
but then
more-
it doesn't work. It doesn't work, man.
But if you're giving them more money for a job, because I struggle with the bottom end. It's really tough. Like, what is the solution? The living wage, I'd be curious to see where they brought that from. Like,
It's probably based on average monthly expenses, and that being 30% for housing and whatever, another 20% for living costs, and blah blah blah. That's how they would break it down based on a 40-hour work week, et cetera, et cetera.
but it's tough. Like, what do you see as the solution to that? Because there's a point once that living wage gets to be so high, then you start seeing these things like the mass poverties and the like major commutes people make. Like, it starts going into what you see basically what big cities have, where like a lot of people that work in these industries live like an hour and a half outside of town because that's the only place they can live and actually pay for
and
stuff.
they basically get shipped in daily.
And they basically get
by-
shipped in
by major
daily, and
transit.
they
Yep.
work a shitload of hours. They usually have multiple jobs.
Well, man, we're getting into a major question. Like, what do you do about that? I think
Which is, it doesn't have to be a super long answer, just on a high level.
we need to stop taxing small businesses through the teeth, but unfortunately, they've convinced these same people who are upset that they're not making enough money that taxing these, smaller businesses is going to actually help them when it hurts them dramatically. I think the other thing is there's been this push from an efficiency standpoint to have as many people living in urban centers as possible, and it's true. Like for education, for healthcare, for road and maintenance, all these things, that is the most efficient way. However, it is not necessarily good for humans. Like, it's not necessarily good to have us jammed and stacked in these cities. So while it's nice to see cities grow, we need our other towns to thrive. So they need to do whatever possible to develop other towns and grow those as opposed to everyone just hoarding towards the cities where things inherently drive up in cost. So basically, if you want to open a business in a secondary market, it should, for all intents and purposes, be free. They should find a way to get you there, whatever it takes to get you to open that business in a secondary market.
The $1 homes in Italy. Yeah, so I would say I agree. One thing, like for me, is like public housing. Like I think,
oh my God!
I bet you of that 2,350, I feel like I bet you 30 to 40% of that is made up of just like living costs, like home cost. And I think like a proper public housing setup that is for people who make under whatever it is living wage would be a really strong way if it was done properly to assist people in doing that. Because we've talked about it a billion times. Yeah. Private industry cannot offer people homes under that cost because just the simple cost to build them and put everything together, like not even including land, because everyone's like, well, it's because the people buying the land are marking it up. If you just take out the actual physical cost to build the properties, it is so high that like there's no way to run those businesses and make money. So they need to. I think that's a good way to inject cash is by offering a public housing system versus just handing people dollops of $300 every week.
You're preaching to the choir. Like we need 10,000 public housing units in Halifax right now. That's a rough estimate, I would say, and another 10,000 spread across the rest of the province.
Totally.
So it's 20,000 units that we need for public housing, and that should be the only priority. All this other bullshit, it's literally that. Just that. Oh, we're doing this. Like I saw the federal government release this thing, like a couple $billion going towards like rent to own. They're going to do 15,000 rent to own units. It's like it doesn't move the needle. As a province, we have to do whatever it takes to get 20,000. Yeah, we need to get 20,000 public housing units as soon as possible. Everything else should be second priority to that. That should be the only priority. It's the only thing from a housing perspective that's really gonna make any impact whatsoever. So we can dance around with all these other things, and this is the problem. We get distracted by what advocacy over there and what project over there, and one thing like
start building units. Start building units.
House people. Start building units. This is a big digression, but I kind of want to talk about it because I haven't quite wrapped my head around it yet, but in a weird way, it's kind of relevant. Did you see that the Bank of America is offering all these zero down mortgages in predominantly Black and Hispanic communities? Yeah. Yeah. So if you purchase in these communities, and I think they have to be at least 50% Black or Hispanic, this is their language that they're using, you can get in with longer amortization, lower rates, supposedly. Or no, not lower rates, but like lower credit requirements, no down payment, et cetera, et cetera. And it, on the one hand, is being promoted as like, isn't this a great opportunity for people who are underrepresented when it comes to home ownership? But there's a sinister element of it too that kind of like immediately made me think, and I kind of unpacked a little bit. But just what's your gut reaction? I don't know if you saw this or thought about it at all.
I saw it, and I forget what the thing was, but it was just like, what was the issue with it again? It was like they're basically sticking people that are not like.
Well, so
it sounds good off the hop, but in general, for me, like before I even get into like the political, like or the controversial side of it, on a simple basis, like I'm just thinking in my head, like the idea of home ownership needs to change as this idea that like that's the key to just getting away from having an issue. Like home ownership is extremely expensive. It's not always a giant asset. And if they're putting into something that's variable for people that aren't necessarily able to keep up with the variable changes, like they are just going to screw all these people over because they're all going to get tied onto a loan that makes sense now. And then it's eventually not going to make sense.
Oh, 100%. So here are the things that are sinister about it. One, the reason that the Bank of America is doing this is because it was actually discovered that their lending was so disproportionately skewed away from these visible minorities that they were close to, I don't want to say like violating any laws, but it was getting so egregiously offensive that they were worried about repercussions because they effectively weren't giving loans out to Black and Hispanic people. So this was a quick way for them to do that in a hurry while looking good, even though it kind of is just to cover up for history.
Did we talk about the one here where the appraiser came in and it was a Black couple and they appraised the house at, let's say, $500K, and then they're like, that's odd. So they had another appraiser come, but they had one of their white couple friends stand in for them,
and they took all
the family photos down,
all
and everything.
Family photos down, anything that could be considered to
relate back to
Black culture.
Yeah,
and the appraisal went up like an absurd amount.
Yeah, like it was crazy,
hundreds of thousands of
dollars more simply off of that, which was unbelievable.
Yeah, and you see these stories all the time, and Bank of America was having that be exposed through their lending practices. So they came up with this program, which again sounds amazing at first glance. The concern though is, as soon as this happens, like there's some fine language in there where it's like you have to invest in these communities. It's mortgages in these communities. It doesn't necessarily state that you specifically have to be Black or Hispanic. It says that you have to buy in these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So there's some concern around manipulation of that little loophole. The other thing is, it's like, really, Bank of America, you choose now to do this when properties are dropping in value, interest rates are rising, and there's more debtor risk than ever before, and now you start giving these people zero down loans. It kind of seems like you're setting them up for failure. And we talked about this too in our conspiracy episode. You can check back to our last episode, where basically during these times of mass inflation, then they can jack rates, you get this big wealth transfer because you saddle the vast majority of the population with debt, and big cash rich corporations or just bigger sharks can devour these people, and you get these huge wealth transfers. So while this could be such a good thing, the cynic in me worries about the timing.
Unemployment numbers in those
real
areas can be higher too during these times. So it's like, my
absolutely.
thing would be on the flip side, if somebody can get into a house now, they might get a cheaper buy. And if they can float the payment today
and ride it out,
they can rent it for 2 years, their payment's going to drop dramatically. Their property value is going to go up, and they might actually be in a really good spot. So if they can get it done today, and it actually makes sense, and they can keep their job remains in place, it could actually be a really good thing versus if they bought when rates were 1%. Under a false pretense that, like, this is what it is. Your payment's only $300 a month, and it's always like this. And house prices just keep going up and up and up and up.
And make no mistake, like, I'm a big believer in owning real estate, and I think that's the quickest way to get ahead and to protect your family for generations to come. So I think anything that facilitates that for groups that maybe didn't have that opportunity in the past is a good thing. But the question is, like, do you trust Bank of America to not be sinister? And, like, I don't know. So we'll see how that all kind of boils
It's interesting
down.
to see if it's like a play on like this ESG score and trying to, like, everything now is like every big corporation is really starting to pay attention to their ESG and like what their perception is, because it's really starting to play an
100%.
impact on what they can do in their business. And so
We
they're
talked
having
about
to come
ESG.
up with stuff.
You guys know how I feel about ESG,
to be
but
clever.
100% this is ESG related.
Yeah, and it's all to be clever, like to like get the points, but then without diminishing their business. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't actually want to do anything for it; they're just doing it because they have to.
Yeah.
But
and again, like, is it actually for the ultimate good? Thanks so much for listening to this point. It's a great time to like, follow, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. But in the second part, keep listening, because we're going to talk about our biggest misses and our biggest successes and how we did them and what it allowed us to do and how it changed things for us. So keep listening. Thanks so much.
So, with that being said, and you're saying real estate's the place to buy.
I wasn't quite sure what you meant. So
okay, well, like I said, you want me to do my first one?
No,
and then
you asked me
jump in?
questions, so I know what questions to ask you, because I don't know. I can't remember how we phrased it.
Okay, well, we'll do the first. We're going to do top 3 misses. So, properties that you wish you had purchased, they came across the table and you hummed and hawed, you sat on the fence and you're like, yeah, I don't see the upside, or this doesn't really make sense. And you're like, man, if I look back, I wish I would have squeezed every dime I had. I would have traded all my RAV4s in for one of these houses. Like, just what was the one?
My gosh.
There's got to be one property deep in your brain that like I see them sometimes. I'll see some that like resell on market, and I'm like, for frig's sakes, like, especially like single family homes in the last couple of years, I'm like, man, I was gonna buy that and live in it. Instead, I blew a bunch of money on rent. Or like, there's been a couple development sites that I've heard trade off market that I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that one go by for.
I mean, I'm trying to think of these off the top here because it was a bit different than what I thought. We'll start with a really small one. There was a duplex in my backyard. Like, literally, I'm on a corner, so it's like in my backyard. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago, like not that long ago. And it sold for $292,000.
Free.
Which is free 99 basically. And it was good. Like, they're side by sides, like, garages on each unit. It's like good. And
Amelia?
what's that? Yeah. You know the one.
Yeah, I know the one.
It's literally my backyard.
Yeah.
And so, like, I share a fence with these people, and I should have purchased it. The timing was just bad. Like, but I also didn't get aggressive on it. And it recently relisted for something like $600,000 or.
Did it sell?
No, it didn't sell.
Probably worth that though.
It's still sitting there in my backyard, and now it makes no sense to buy it. But in hindsight, having it, and just this is one that purely for my family. Like, one, I would put a couple families in there that have kids to play with my kids. And 2, I have a long-term concern about the cost of real estate and where my kids are going to live.
Say your kids are going to live in the...
Having a property right next to ours as they get older and they start their families, I actually think about that sort of thing.
Chandler's gonna be the one calling his kids like, it's a little late to have lights on.
Or
what
like,
are you guys
pull
doing
your
over there?
blinds down, for God's sake. So like I kind of feel like, that's a small little one, and I don't know that there's much to take from that, but that's one that I kind of wish I picked up.
Okay.
What's
All
your
right.
first?
I'll do one that's very similar then, maybe. How's that? So it's on a street. I've talked about the street a bazillion times. I own 7 buildings on that street. I had bought my first building, and then I was trying to buy neighboring ones. So I just looked up everyone's phone numbers, and I was calling all of them. And so I found some. I bought two more buildings, and they were 6 units, and I paid for $360 for each of them, which even that felt a little aggressive. Because they were in dilapidated shape. They needed everything. Doors were screwed shut, windows were screwed shut. They were boarded up. I called the neighbor. He said he wanted, this is a weird number, but $426,000. And I was like, $426,000 for a 6 unit. I just paid $360.
What a weird number, 426 too. Not 425.
71,000 a unit for whatever reason.
Okay.
And I was like, you're out to lunch. Like, what? No chance. Anyways, someone else bought it for 460 or 426, maybe 6 months later. And now I'm trying to buy it because I own the properties on both sides of it. And he wants 1.25. And it's not worth 1.25, but it is to him.
No, it is not.
So
it is not.
It is to him. And so, and he's not, and I've been bugging him for the 2 years since, and he's not willing to do anything less. And I'm like, fuck, because it would have been nice to have. Then I'd have, I don't even know how many square feet in a row. Like, it would have been probably 100,000 square foot lot with all of my lots combined, and not really worth anything today. Like, it's good as 6 units and they're good for what they are, but maybe in the future, you never know.
Yeah,
Right?
25, 30 years from now, when the economic life of those buildings is back getting down, that you could look at it and be like, okay,
yeah,
I've got enough space here with the center plan where I could go for a development agreement.
Yeah.
Because there's enough acreage and really do something major there. You know what? You talking about that reminded me of my second one. So I own like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 parcels. All
Jesus, we got it.
Beside each other, with the exception of one that's in between me. Oh, you find this funny. I like it. These are sometimes called stubborn nail houses. And it is a poo hole. Like, it is the disgusting.
It literally is a poo hole.
It is one of the worst properties inside the circumferential in Dartmouth. It recently caught on fire, and somehow
still kicking.
Somehow one leg missing, still kicking. It's still being rented out, but it's terrible. I remember this person bought it for something like 160 grand, 170 grand, something like that.
Yeah.
And I do not need this parcel of land because I have the development agreements for all the pieces around it, but it would be convenient to have, right? I could make a building slightly larger, or better than that, I could just level it to the ground because it's disgusting. And we had an agreement at 270, and then he said, no, we need a bit more, so 280. Then he said, no, need a bit more. And then he said 300. And then I think it was like 325, and it just kept going up and up and up. And then eventually he got to like a number at like 350, which I was like, this is ludicrous. And who knows? Even if I had said yes, I'll do it, whether or not he would have done it, because he seems to not have all his marbles. Yeah. And I think last time I asked, he wanted 600.
Man, this is like the properties you see downtown. You need to just build your buildings.
Oh man, here's the thing: like, his property has gone up in value, and then as soon as I build, it is going to drop off the face of the earth and never be worth even what it's worth in this moment for some period of time. Because one, it's going to have to be torn down soon. It's in that bad repair.
The lot's so small that you can't build anything on there.
You can't build anything on there. It has no parking. It has no anything like. So I'm his. I'm not his get out of jail free card. I'm his once in a lifetime cash in card, and he doesn't want to play it. But my ego and my stubbornness in the moment to not overpay, I lost perspective, and no one could have seen the market do what it's has done since. However, I should have maybe had a bit more foresight and found a way to make that one happen.
Yeah, that's similar to what happened with this one. All right. I know the property. I remember when it caught on fire. We drove over to take a peek and see what was going on.
I was hoping it burned to the ground. I was
Hopefully he
like,
doesn't
I
listen to the
came with my
podcast.
kerosene bottle and I just like a little spritzer. No
Taylor's
dice.
going to jail. All right, I'll give another one. So this is a house. It wasn't that long ago, probably about 8 months ago. Maybe a year, but I'd say 8 months ago. And the house came up and it had a 1 acre lot. It's about a half an hour from downtown, but the zoning is really advantageous. And so I had some clients that buy out there and I was like, hey guys, like this house is on here. It's got 1 acre land, good zoning, probably get a multi-unit on here, but there's a house now. So you can just put down 20%, maybe even 10% and rent it out. And it was only $225K. And anyways, they said, no, I'm not interested. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, maybe I should buy it. They'll just buy it and I could put a multi-unit on it. And I hesitated and I don't know what I was thinking. And then it had a multi-offer bid and they accepted an early offer. It was pending for like 2 months. And then I finally firmed up at $255,000. Sure enough, I know the guy who bought it. Talked to him. He got approved a permit for 100 units.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to rebuy it from him then for $1 million.
Yeah.
I talked about it on here before, and it just pained me to think that I could have even just bought it for the $250. Anyways, I didn't buy it for $1 million. Somebody else did buy it for $1 million or $1.1 million. I heard recently that it has reappraised for $3 million. So he flipped it over, made whatever it was after permitting, probably $600,000-700,000. And then the next person now is up another $2 million.
Well, they're coming back down on reality on that.
They're going to come back down. And when I ran the numbers a bunch of times, it didn't make a ton of sense to build it as 100. Like I was going to go to an 80, and even that, like it was going to be an expensive build, and there was a bunch of other weird stipulations. But realistically, it was still worth a hell of a lot more than 250.
Oh my god!
And it would have been so nice to be able to just buy it, put down 20%, $50,000. And rent it out, and whenever many years it takes, eventually just have an 80-unit build site in a nice neighborhood ready to roll.
So I think takeaways so far, my first one would be, try to always stay looking forward on any opportunity, right? Like to not kind of just dismiss one offhand because you want to be like, all right, what could this be 5 years from now? Where am I going to be 5 years from now? Is this going to be a property that adds something to my life 5 years from now or not? The second one for mine was to not let ego and stubbornness kind of get in the way. Any takeaways for you from those first two?
I think get my ass off the fence. Like I am a very cautious buyer. The 426, I know I said like I thought he was insane and all that. I wouldn't say it was an eagle play for me. For me, it was just like I was nervous already buying at the price that I was buying at. And that was just because the neighborhood was so beat up when I got in there that it was hard to fathom doing it. And I hadn't finished the other buildings I had bought, so I didn't know what the model was going to look like. I didn't have confidence on what I was going to get for rents on the end. And so projecting the lower rents, it was hard for me to see the end. And the appraisals at that time were not that exciting. I used an appraiser that
like
really was not aggressive. On those, not even, probably like 785 or something. Like
right.
It was real low. So by the time you take your refinance, I only had like $100,000 to renovate a building that needed like $400,000. And so that was kind of soft. And then the house on the acreage was just like kind of saw it, kind of thought about it, recommended to a client, and then was just kind of like humming and hawing and didn't get super serious about it. Like I find anytime I don't get super serious about it, I get kicked in the butt and the deal goes. Like you need to be all over it and get it going. And that's what I should have done. I should have even just thrown it under offer. I should have just tried to throw, even if I thrown something and I'd feel a little better to know that I got beat. Like
right.
I just did one recently where I got beat and I was like, whatever. Like at least
you played the game.
I showed up.
Yeah.
I didn't even show up to this because I was just kind of slacking. And I was like, I'll call the agent later. And then it took an offer early. I'm like, well, I should have. If it was for my client, I would have called them the first friggin' day and we would have been in there on the early offer day competing against the other early offer. Because for me, I was just like, well, whatever.
He who hesitates. My last one is kind of similar in a lot of respects, and I talked about it on this property before. There was a building that was on my to-call list, and it had been on my to-call list for years. I still have that to-call list somewhere, and I haven't really learned my lesson because I haven't been calling the other ones either. The 12 unit that I just closed was from that to-call list, but this one was on there for the longest time, and I never approached them. And then a friend of mine called me like all excited because he had just bought this building. Mm-hmm. And he was describing them like, I know that damn building. And so not only were these sellers, and not only would have only taken one phone call, but they sold at a good price. And I tried to buy the deal from him for, I think, 115 or like 15,000 per door more than he paid. Can't remember how many units it was, but a few $100,000. I tried to just buy the deal from him on reassignment, and he wouldn't do it because he got that good of a deal. There were two takeaways that I took for that. One, You got
Never
to
trust your friends.
You got yeah, he greased me now. One, you got to make the calls, right? Like you've got to be consistent. You got to continue to keep the pipeline going.
Yeah.
And you can't hesitate on that. The other thing is, I sort of assumed they wouldn't be sellers because they had a family name that I knew kind of peripherally. I didn't know this particular part of the family, but I knew the family name. And I believe they just weren't the type to be sellers because oftentimes they weren't. But I was wrong. And they sold it, and they sold it at a good price. And you know, that's one, I know this guy, that property's never going to come back to market, like not for 35 years. So that's one that's just gone into the universe and will never be back.
That's a good point. I'll always assume everyone's going to be a seller. You kind of have to. And sadly, sometimes they're the ones you think are most likely going to be, and it makes the most sense for them to be, they're not. But sometimes the ones that you least expect it are. And sometimes other developers and whatever aren't necessarily as crazy because sometimes people, it's like their one property, they want some crazy number.
Yeah.
Developers are more realistic. Like, this is the income, this is what it's worth, and this is what I have.
And everyone's a seller eventually, right? So sometimes it's on a longer timeline. Right?
True.
So
last one, I'm going to have to be even more vague in some sense, but it was brought to me from a friend of mine, and he had put a property under contract. It was a large commercial property with a big piece of land, probably 10 acres. And
that's a lot.
He's like, look, I'm buying all this and I need a couple partners on it. And so he had a meeting with me and 2 or 3 other people in his office. That it was an evening meeting. We sat, he presented it, kind of talked about what might be the potential and what the couple options were. It didn't have anything like as of right, didn't show any kind of value right off in the future. He was paying market value. The seller is a very well-known person who knows exactly what their stuff is worth. And they were like, this is what it's worth today. That's what I'm willing to sell it for. And it was probably, I think it was in the $7 million range. And he needed basically he was bringing a couple people in. And he was hoping to get a couple $100,000 from each person to help finalize the down payment. And we were each going to take a percentage out of it. He ended up closing it. I backed out the main reason was I backed out. I Googled his name and there was some pending issues with other financing contracts he had going on. And so it gave me kind of the heebie-jeebies because I was nervous that he was in a bad place and that I might get caught up in it. Come to find out now, it's been whatever it is, 2-3 years since probably more than that, 3 years. And that property got rezoned to allow for, I think, almost 1,000 units. And so now he's up from whatever $7 million purchase to probably around a $25 million value. And it would probably sell pretty freaking quickly to some large investor, even if it sold for double. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was rented the whole time, and it was at a commercial deal, so it was a decent cap rate, so like a cash flow the whole way through. So to pass that one up now, I'm looking at it like, damn, that was. I was talking to him, I bumped into him the other day, and he was like, yeah, you know that one, that one's now worth X, and I was like, oh, shit. But you know what? I don't know if I'm as regretful for that. Like, I'm regretful because I didn't do it, but I feel like the logic at the time for not doing it made sense.
Was sound. Yeah, totally, man. And that was also a couple years ago. That would have been a major risk at the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So. Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about your wins.
Yeah. Top 3 wins, the more exciting stuff. Number 1, I've talked about it a bunch of times on here. It was a single family home in the south end of Halifax. I was sitting in class. At that point, I owned a duplex. I had flipped a single family home and I had a little bit of cash from trading, selling cars. I just had a little bit of cash in my account. I was trading a ton of Bitcoin actually at the time. And I was on Viewpoint here locally, just scrolling constantly, not paying attention in class. And one popped up just one block over from the university for $350K. I had been watching it. It was listed for $700, then it was listed for $600, $500, then they dropped it to $350. And I literally was sitting in class and I saw the update and I was like freaking out, called the listing agent and I was like, I need to get in this property today. She got me in there that same day and I was like, I want this place. Like, I need this place. Let's do it. She hyped me up too. I got to give her mad credit. I need to call her back or go see her. At that time, nobody paid over ask. And she was like, you got to go over asking on this. $5,000 over ask. I was gonna do 1,000 over ask. I was gonna do 351.
Look at you go.
And she was like 355. And for me, I was like, holy Jesus, the $4,000. I will never financially recover from this. This is insanity. Like, I cannot do this. Who's paying over for list for properties? Nobody. Like, I don't think any houses that year sold for over list. I was like, all right, I'm taking your word. And I remember her saying when we were sitting in her office at like 9 p.m. She's a good agent. She was there with me all night to keep me into it. And she goes, she's like, I promise you will not regret this. You will come back in a few years and thank me for doing this deal. And in my head, I was like, that's what every realtor says. Like, there's no way, blah, blah, blah. I was like, whatever. It's going to be an okay deal. It's not going to be that great. Well, I'm going to go back. It's been a few years and I'm going to thank her because it was the greatest thing ever. I bought it for $355. I turned the single family into a triplex, rented it to students. It's now worth, I think, $1.1 million. I pulled out a bunch of cash and that was the first property that I was sitting in class and I got whatever it was, $176,000 back in my bank account, and everything changed. I was just like, holy crap! Like this is the game.
Crack the code.
I've cracked the code. I'm not working as an engineer. I'm making this happen. So that was the one that like started it all. Shout out, can't shout her out. She's still a realtor, and she was good. She's no MKR, but she was good.
Yeah.
But anyways, what's your top hit?
Let me see. I'll do kind of a fun one. The one that got me started is my first one because, I remember like I was there signing the paperwork and like my hand was shaking. And this is after I'd been a realtor for like 6 months. So other people were like, yeah, buy this house, man. It's no big deal. And then I go to buy one. I remember I was working at an open house. But we had seen the property and really liked it. So I like jetted over to my in-laws, fired this offer together, and like my hand was nervous. And same deal, it was on for like $239, and I'm like, all right, I want to make this offer good enough that they'll accept it right away. So I went $234, right, close enough that they're just gonna like take it, and they did. But anyway, I also then randomly, you'll appreciate this, I got a really good deal on a luxury vehicle.
Ooh.
I had a client who was quite eccentric, and she was a funny lady, and she had this Lexus RX 3000. Is that what they call it, a 300?
Be like a 350 or 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
And her ex had bought it for her, so out of spite, she never drove it. She sat that sucker in her driveway in Bedford, and it never moved, to the point that it dented the asphalt. And everyone that knows, like that has fancy cars, know that's kind of the worst thing you can do for a fancy car. But like it was, for the time, very tricked out. Sunroof, tinted windows, leather interior, 5-disc changer in the trunk. Like this thing was legit.
Pull over and go to the trunk to change your CD.
Yeah, you got to pull over. Yo, put in that new EPMD. So she moved, like she was moving out of the province, and she wanted to get rid of this thing, and it was $10,000. Problem is that it sat there and never run. So anytime someone came to drive it, something would go wrong. It's like, it wouldn't turn over. Okay, it needs a new battery. Now it's $8,000. Someone goes to drive it. Oh, this wouldn't work. The console would act up. She puts another $1,500 into it, drops the price again. And now she's out of province, and she's like, hey, I've got it stored at this guy's house because he's going to sell it for me. But he says now that he doesn't want it in his driveway anymore. Can I store it at your house? I'm like, no, you can't store it at my house. I think at this point it was like $7,500.
Yeah.
She's like, would you buy it? I'm like, no thanks. She's like, what about $5,000? I'm like, honestly, like I don't really want it. I'm driving a beautiful Hyundai Sonata right now. I'm in a good place in my life. And she goes, what about $3,500? I'm like, okay, sold. So I had this gold Lexus RX 300, I had the sunroof open, and I was just cruising and feeling pretty good about myself. And like I was driving it for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I started noticing like little things. One, I don't think she was a great driver because there's all these dents in it. So I checked out, I was going to go to like the dent guy, and like I got a quote for $1,500 to take some of the dents out.
Yeah.
And then the AC went.
That's a lot of dents, by the way, because I've gotten some dents pulled for like $300.
Yeah, there's $1,500 worth of dents. And so then the air conditioning went, right? Like, and everything on these cars cost so damn much money. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to put some money into the dents. I'm going to put some money into the AC. So, then I'll have this car. And man, we're sitting in that first place that I ever bought, just watching TV. And I just remember hearing this massive crunch, like just a big noise, but it sounded like it came from behind the house. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Someone got in an accident down below. Then I hear a knock at the door. And this guy's at the door. He's like, is that your gold Lexus? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I just hit it. Sorry. So this guy hit it with a F-150. Smash this thing. But I will say, these Lexuses, they're built tough. Like, he had to get towed. His F-150
We're not sponsored by Lexus.
Needed to get towed away. I drove the Lexus to the dealership and be like, hey, man, like this guy smashed it in front of my house. Long story short, it could not be salvaged because every part of those is $1,500. They're like back tinted window, $1,500. Panel, $1,500. Like everything was $1,500. And then I got a check as a result for $20,000 because that was the red book value because it had no mileage and it had been tricked out.
Telling you, flipping cars.
So I had, unbeknownst to me, bought one for $3,500 and it, the book value on it was $20,000 because she had never driven the thing.
No way.
And so I had $20,000 and I bought my second property with it. And I was out there in Sackville. Sackville's the used car capital of the world. I was there looking at $20,000 BMWs. and which is what Neal would do. This is my Neal phase. But instead, I bought my second duplex with basically no money out of pocket because at the time that could be my down payment. So that's a long-winded story. But either the car was the best thing I bought or the duplex. I don't know, but that's my story.
That was sick. Okay, I like that one. I don't have one as cool as that. I feel like flipping cars though has given me my down payment. Okay, my second one's a little different, and it's a 2-unit that I bought. It was actually the very first transaction I did as a realtor, and prior to that, I had just finished university. I was living in a basement apartment. I hated it. Anyways, I was so keen as a realtor, like, I gotta get a transaction. And I hadn't put a client transaction through yet. And I found this duplex that came up that I kind of wanted, $240K. And I was gonna buy with a partner. And so we went and looked at it, and he's like, this is a shithole. Like, there's no point. It sat on an acre of land though, in Bedford. And I was like, oh no, I think it's pretty good. And like I kept pushing him. He said, okay, yeah, sure. But then he kind of just ghosted me. So we put the deposit down. We firmed up on the deal at $240K. Ghosted me.
Ghosted you after you were
firm.
Oh my God,
yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, it was kind of wishy-washy, but closing day is coming up. We had nothing in the pipe sorted out. So then I just stepped up. I was like, screw it. I got to get the financing, sort out the financing, come up with a down payment, and buy this place. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And within like a month or two, like one of the tenants or two of the tenants both just left. They upped and left. No, one of them just upped and left. Didn't tell me anything, just upped and left. And so I drove out there, and the unit was gross. And I was just like all the carpets smell like piss, and the walls are really dark green, and the cabinets were gross. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Anyways, my lease was coming up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to move into this thing. And so that's what I did. I moved out there. I took all the carpets up, put down laminate flooring, painted it, put new trim in, redid the bathroom, and like did it all very slowly, very frugally, super cheap. I got all these deals and was doing it in the evenings. I was working like a dog as a realtor. And then like at 8 p.m., my girlfriend used to say our date night every night was Kent. We'd go from at 8 p.m. I'd get home. She had a little hatchback, and we'd go over to Kent. We'd buy supplies. We'd be fixing it up.
Man, when I was fixing up my first place, I'd like dap everyone at Kent when I came in. Like I knew every single person at the Micmac Kent.
This was exactly it. I was at Dartmouth Crossing, and anyways, got it all cleaned up. And it actually wasn't a bad spot. Like it had a nice big yard. We had a fire pit out back. I really ended up enjoying it because there's Bedford's its own little city in a way. Like it has all the things that you need, and so I ended up loving living out there. And it was also a super cheap way to live, which allowed me to get ahead because I had somebody renting another unit. I only paid $240,000 for it. The interest rate was like 2%. So with all my payments and everything in, I worked out that I was spending a couple $100 a month to live, if that. And it allowed me at that time where I was so tight because I had started a new business that was failing like really hard. I wasn't making very much money as a realtor, and I was trying to get this game going. It allowed me to just save, and actually get ahead. And we would buy Kijiji furniture. We slowly kept upgrading it and making our way through it. And so like now I'm looking at building a 30-unit building on that property.
You still have that?
Yeah, and I ended up keeping the place. I was so close to selling it, but I kept it. And then I went and met, and they're like, yeah, they'd probably put like they were super keen actually for me to do something with it. So I'm going to go through the permitting process soon.
No way, I didn't know that.
And I'm hoping to get around 30 units, but yeah, like it ended up being like, I'm super glad that I bought it. I'm super glad that I moved out there, but the whole time it seemed like a bad buy.
Well, at some point you got to take the risk, right? Like you got to jump. And I think that's one of the good takeaways is, calculate it, right? But you got to pull the trigger. You got to jump. And it's interesting how, what do we have in common to those? They're our first buys.
Yeah.
Getting yourself going. I mean, they all look good in hindsight, right? Like that's the beauty of time and appreciation, all that. They all look good in hindsight, but the earlier you can get this snowball rolling, the better.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I tell people all the time, like, what should I look for in the first one? Like the first one should be like the one that you get quickest, like get it rolling.
It saved my bacon once too, because I was pretty much dead broke and I only owed on it like 150, 180 grand or something. No, I had to put 20% down. So I only owed like 180K and I've been paying it down. So maybe even less. And I was like, oh shit, like I have no money right now. And I was like, well, what's this worth? And the rents had gone up dramatically. When I bought it, it was rented for like 800 and 500. When I re-rented it, I put it up, I think I put it up for 750 or 800, and I had a literal lineup down the street. It was insanity. There was cars everywhere. There was a lineup going down the staircase. I under-rented it, obviously, but a great tenant. She's still in there today. But I reappraised it for $375, $400K, and so I had $150,000 that I didn't ever even think about. And I needed it because I had no money, and I was able to get the money out, and it still cash flowed because the rate wasn't bad, and I had increased the rents by like literally double. And when I bought it, it cash flowed a bunch. And so like I was like, this is it. That property ended up being like my saving grace in a lot of ways.
This is why I tell this to people all the time. Like the power of real estate is like, what if an emergency happened in your life, right? A real terrible situation, and you needed to come up with $40,000 in 30 days.
Yeah.
Like, could you do it? And a lot of people understandably are like, no, I can't do it. If you have real estate, you can. And here's another one. Like, what if the opportunity of a lifetime came up that could change your life forever, but you needed $60,000 in 30 days? Could you do it? And oftentimes, again, the answer is no. But those that have real estate, if you get in a jam or if you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, having real estate allows you to, survive those situations or take advantage of those opportunities.
Just park all your cars out of your driveway in the street on a really crooked angle, so that
and
around a blind
Just
corner.
wait for that windfall, baby. That's sweet insurance settlement money.
You want to hit your last one?
Is this my last one?
It's the last one.
I can't remember what my first one was. I think I just did a long-winded answer on my first one.
Maybe.
I mean, the big thing that changed my trajectory was when I took all the small multis, because I bought that first one, and then I used the money from the broken Lexus to buy the second one, and then I scrounged some money together to buy a fixer-upper single-family house, and then I bought another duplex. And actually, I bought another single-family home in Halifax, basically just a flip because it was such a good deal. And then I bought a duplex over in Dartmouth. And the duplex was the first one that I had to put 20% down on. And it was pretty cheap. It was like $230,000 because it was a dump. But by the time I did all my closing costs, I'm like, man, I had to put, I think it was like $80,000 down on this thing. Right? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this doesn't seem smart to me. Like putting all this money down, 20% down on these. And it's like, I probably sat down with Igor, who I kind of consult for all my financing stuff. He's like, yeah, I mean, at that sort of thing, like, why wouldn't you just put 20 or 25% down on like an actual multi-unit building?
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned this building before. We brought it up in one of the early episodes where we talked about our first properties and stuff. It was a 12-unit building. It was right in my neighborhood. I'd stared at it for the longest time. I'd walked into the lobby and been a creeper on it before. And man, just coincidentally, it came up and it was
creeping the property, not the tenants.
Yeah, $640,000 for 12 units, all 2 bedrooms, great location. Jeez. And what I did is I refinanced every single property, like all 5 of my properties that I'd, just busted my butt to get these things. I took every dollar out of all of them. I had to get my mom to guarantee a loan as well, just to get the down payment on that place. But needless to say, at $640,000, I've done very well on that property and multiple refinances since. It's probably, I don't know, my rents are low there, but it's probably worth, I don't know, 160, 170 a door at least, and that's only that low because the rents aren't that high.
If the rents were proper, it'd be over $2.5 million.
Yeah, so that's the one, and it was a gigantic risk. I remember, you want to talk sleepless nights, and on that project, I really struggled, and a couple contractors, and who've become really good friends since, kind of bailed me out on it. But again, it's about taking that leap, man. Like once you've kind of plateaued and realized, okay, I've done this, I've mastered this now. With the first purchase, it was like, all right, I've helped other people do this. I know I can do this. I know how this works, and I did it. And that this was like, all right, I know how the small scale multis work. I've got that. All I need to do now is just multiply that across 12 units instead of 2. And I pulled the trigger on it, and it's changed my life since. Totally.
I'm going to echo almost the exact same. Going from buying houses to getting into my first multi-unit. It was an 11-unit building, and I saw a news article that it had caught on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And I've talked about it many times on here before. But
smoking hot deal,
literally smoking hot. And I went to the owner's house and chatted with her, and she was super nice. She brought me in. We chatted for a bit. Then we met again at the property. We walked through it, and it was, the whole bottom floor was completely gutted. There was nothing left. Insurance had already gone through and ripped it all to bits. And basically, we talked about it, and she was like, look, once you see all the damage, you might not be so interested. And I walked through, and I was still interested. And so she texted me maybe after 3-4 days and says, hey, do you want to make an offer? And I said, yeah. And I texted her a number, and it was a bit low, but I was just very nervous. I'd never bought into that before. I was a little stressed out. I didn't know what the numbers were going to be on the back end because I hadn't received any appraisals on true multi-unit buildings at that point in time. And she didn't respond for 3-4 days, and I'm freaking out. And finally she texts me back and she says, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do this. And so I sign it up. We get into it. And then after a few weeks, I explained to her that I'm having some trouble with financing. And it's because I'm new. I have no background in this at all. And a lot of
and the
banks don't want to get
building's
involved. And the building has been caught on fire multiple times in the past. And so there's a lot of banks that don't want to be involved that have already been burnt on it, pun intended.
Hey,
And so she ends up stepping up to give me a vendor take back for almost the entire amount. She did 85% for me, and I did the 15%.
85% vendor take back.
And so on that closing, I got cash for my first construction draw from a private. And that private too, same thing. I talked with them, and we're actually going to be presenting with them tomorrow. They said they were taking a flyer on me on that first building because same deal. I had no background. I had no stabilized income. I really had nothing. I had a couple properties to my name, which gave them a bit of security, and they blanketed all that. But that was the only thing, and no regular bank would touch me. And so, anyways, I got into it. I ended up going. The numbers worked out better than I thought. The rental cost way more than I thought. But the end value came out much higher than I thought as well. And it just worked. The timing worked out really well. I was able to get some cash out of it. And I ended up doing a CMHC. And because the numbers are so good, CMHC ended up giving me, I think it worked out to almost being 88% loan to value. And now that properties continue to appreciate a bunch and it cash flows really, really well. It's locked in at a great rate. And so that really set the tone and kind of allowed me to go. And the cash that I pulled out of that, I used to buy the other 6 buildings on that street.
Exactly.
Like it set the tone and changed my life and got me rolling.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's super interesting. Would love to hear any, any details about your first buy, anything like that. Just throw it down in the comments. I think we probably
tell us the one that you missed. Which one you said?
Why do you make people?
You got to think about that. What's the one that every day you're like, I screwed up.
The one that got away.
The one that got away.
The one that got away. Fire that.
I wish I bought
Bitcoin
Bitcoin when it was $2.
Yeah, I remember first time I heard about Bitcoin, I was like, what? Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening. Again, as always, please like, follow, subscribe. We'll maybe get into some of what's going on in our own lives here coming up, too.
Yeah, it's the next episode. We'll get some more updates.
Hopefully by the next episode, I will have closed another like a 16-unit building and then that run of duplexes and stuff like that.
Oh, nice. Yep.
Hopefully going to be closed out in a week. Don't forget to check out the Patreon. And please comment any questions you have. Thanks to all those of you who have reached out.
Yeah. Peace.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.